Hey, Tina, the audience is yours, my friend. Over to you.
Thank you, Jill, and welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Tina Jackson, and I'm coming to you from Gadigal land, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodian of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters and community, and to pay my respects to the people, the cultures, and to elders past and present. And on behalf of everyone this morning, thank you, Dean and Kate. That was such an inspiring discussion, which has set the scene so compellingly for this session. And it was great to hear your thoughts on native goodwill, keeping it simple, spending time to listen, active listening, and the idea of soft nose, which I think Emily's going to talk to us a little bit more about. And look, we know we've only got a few months ahead of us as we work towards our vote on the voice, and that this is one of the most defining moments of our collective history. We also know the referendum will be carried by what non-Indigenous people say and do. So we are the people in the frame, and we're being asked to show up with compassion and kindness and a willingness to actively do the work. So our panel this afternoon will deep dive into the work, the practicalities of what we need to do to answer the call of history. So this session is a call to action. So with me to talk about action are some extraordinary people working tirelessly to ensure we get a yes vote. So Emily Holm from the National Field Organiser for Yes23, and Mary Crooks from Together Yes, she's the project director. Kath Naish from Wentworth, community engagement for Allegra Spender, and Nicolette Boele, the shadow representative for Bradfield. And after the discussion, Michelle Dunscombe, who gave that beautiful acknowledgement of country earlier, a proud Gunditjmara woman, she'll share her reflections with us all to close the morning sessions on the voice. And in the chat, we'll be sharing resources and different events and things that we would like you to engage with. So to kick us off, and following on from Dean's comments, we're hearing people have already made up their minds. So to start the discussion, can I ask each of you from your different perspectives, what's your response to that? And also, when you're thinking about that, how important it's going to be to get outside our bubble. And maybe you could give us an example of that. And Dean talked about the quiet people. So a couple of minutes from everybody, starting with you, Emily.
Sure, thank you very much. And thank you all for having me here today. I'd like to start, of course, by acknowledging that I live and work on the lands of the Awabakal people and the Worimi people here in Newcastle, and pay my respects to elders past, present. And yeah, it was really great to listen to Dean. We work together. We don't spend much time hanging out though, so that was really good for me. To answer your question, I think it's true to say a lot of people have made up their minds, but I don't think that we should be worried about that. The majority of people who have currently made up their minds have made up their minds to vote yes. And of course, those who've been really passionate about this and paying attention for a long time will have seen, as Dean mentioned, people kind of moving to the no from a general yes to a question they didn't know in a contested political space. But we're in the majority. We're in a really strong position to win this across the country, the yes vote. So of those who've made up their mind, we're the majority, and that's a good thing. But I would also say that there are still almost 5 million people in this country who have not heard of this or who have not got a hard opinion about how they're going to vote. So if we're saying, what's the point of taking action? Everyone's made up their minds. Absolutely not. That is just not what we're seeing. And while it is the case that the No campaign, and we can talk about this in more detail, has a long path through those millions of people and a much longer path than we have, they also have some advantages in how they get to do that. Our advantage, as you've mentioned, is getting out of the bubble and talking to people, a thing that you all know how to do very well. But the quickest way to disavow yourself of the worry that everyone's made up their minds is to ask a stranger, ask a taxi driver, ask the person at the cafe. I do this because I'm crazy. I don't know. I do this as a gut check to see, you know, how things are going, and I don't think you should ask volunteers to do something you're not willing to do yourself. And there are so many people who do not know what this is or what this is about, and who, when they have a 30-second conversation with a friendly stranger, leave feeling like, oh, cool, I can support that. And that's what this campaign will be about.
Thank you. Mary, your thoughts on the getting outside our bubbles and the quiet corners?
Yeah, well, I think Emily, not surprisingly, has stolen my thunder. Look, I don't believe that a lot of people have made up their minds, and I'll come back to it a little bit later, I think, too. But I think that the big challenge is not so much getting out of the bubble, but to actually focus on the principles at stake here. Because if people are making up their minds, or if they're watching the so-called debate, it's noisy, it's confusing, it's superficial, quite a bit of it is racist, quite a bit of it is a fairly lazy kind of thinking. And I think that when you focus people's minds on the principles at stake, in other words, do we wish to honour Aboriginal civilization of some 60,000 years and their descendants by recognition in our founding document, yes or no? And do we wish to find a governance mechanism that short circuits the harm done to Indigenous communities over generations? Do we want to try and have a better go at improving the lives of Indigenous folk and our nation, yes or no? When I talk to people like that over the last weeks and months, people invariably start to think a little bit differently through all the noise and the chatter. There is a moral and ethical case to voting yes. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that and not get caught up in this ridiculous notion of, you know, is it to the executive? Will it lead to high court challenges? I mean, you know, the jury's in on all of that. Let's focus on the morality and the ethical basis to voting yes.
Yes. Nicolette, your thoughts?
I tend to agree with Mary. I think that there are a very large proportion of people that still don't know that we're going to a referendum at the end of the year. And there's a great opportunity. I think the Yes campaign's just getting started. It's been really easy for the No campaign. It's just about dropping in a little seed of doubt, which is quite infectious. And I still think and feel that the media generally has played into that balanced view, which, coming out of working in climate change for the last 30 years, I'm feeling a little frustrated about that, but, you know, equanimity, here we go. Hey, I think also it's worth mentioning that, you know, so many of us are part of this community independent movement because we understand that this transcends left and right party stuff. This is just about community. It's about feeling safe and creating safe places for people to turn up and have a conversation about issues that they care about. And as long as we stay focused on that North Star, I think we can together basically bring a great conversation, bring people with us. The three things that I like to focus on for when I turn up every morning and think about how to get a good result out of Bradfield, or one that I think is going to be in the national interest and the interest of First Australians and frankly our relations with other countries, is care, it's collaboration, and it's courage. They're my 3 C's.
Thank you. Care, collaboration, and courage. Beautiful. So we know we've only got a few months. So Emily, could I ask you, what timeframe should we all have in mind, like working back from when we think the referendum might be held? Could you run us through all the different phases of the campaign and what Yes23 is planning for each phase?
Absolutely. I don't think I'm the only one who's examined the kind of parliamentary calendar and the way things may go. And I don't think I'll be telling any secrets if I tell you all that we expect a referendum to be held in October at this stage, in one of the first 2 weeks. And of course that could change, and we won't know until the government sets a date. But at the moment, that's what we're planning for. And then working back from that day that is looking more and more close every time I talk about it. We've got a couple of different phases of the campaign, and looking at the people who are yet to make up their minds. All of our thinking in terms of a field campaign in particular is focused on those people, as well as those who already support the campaign, of course. We spend very little time thinking about the other side, and I think that's a good thing. So in the kind of 6 weeks leading up to referendum day, we'll be, we want to have a kind of a field army in every electorate. We want to have a highly visible, highly positive campaign that says to that community, in that community's voice, we can do this, we can talk about this, we're going to take a step forward together. And what that looks like will vary from place to place, of course. And then, stretching that back for another 6 weeks, we're looking at 12 weeks. There's the window where people start to turn their attention. People who aren't already thinking about it like us start to turn their attention to what's going to happen. And so at that point, we want to have our field campaigns starting to get engaged in direct voter contact. Again, in whatever way works for them. We want to see more community forums happening in councils, in churches, in sports clubs. All of those people who are giving their support loudly now, will start to kind of mobilise towards a point and start to pull in the people who really haven't thought about this, and to do that with the supporters that they already have. So all the time before that for us in the field campaign will be spent with our supporters, getting to the point where we, as hard yes supporters around the country, are about 45%. We've got a nice layer of soft yes supporters who will all vote yes as well, but there's a really strong cohort of people around the country that almost make up the 50% on their own who are really passionate about this. And the phase of the campaign that we're in now is about mobilising and empowering those people to know that if they talk to 2 or 3 genuinely undecided people each and bring them along, we can do this. And I know it feels really daunting. I got that sense from the earlier session about, what if we fail and it's a contested space and this is really stressful? It is, but we can absolutely do this. And I think we need to make sure that we're stepping forward into that together, and that we look around and see that there is a very genuine group of supporters who can almost carry this on their own. And so from the national campaign's perspective, the things that we want those people to be doing, coming together in local groups and making a plan. You can put yourself on our website as a local group, and we'll send people who want to get involved in your area to you, and we'll provide the support in a way that works for you. Some groups are really experienced and want to do everything. Some groups are very focused on market stalls and whatever that looks like for them. So we've got a system in place to kind of work through what's going to work for each group, how to register them, what we can give them in support in terms of material. And there's a lot more material on the way. I'm sure there's people in this audience who are like, I need flyers, I need posters. They're coming. But that's our field building system. We've got 50 local groups now to carry a big exciting referendum day. You'd want to have at least one really big group in every federal electorate. So that's 151. That's a really good position to be in, 50 right now. And then at an individual level, we also just need supporters to be really confident about this, and to be really confident in speaking to strangers about this, and know that you're the message. Your support is the thing that they need to know about. They need to know that you think it's a really good idea, that you are not necessarily an expert, but you think they should vote yes. We know that makes the biggest difference in organising for change. And I know that the people in this room know that. And so that is the main thing, that for the first kind of phase until really July and the middle of July, we need people to start getting together and getting excited to talk to the people who aren't paying attention in a way that, as Dean touched on, is open, is inviting, is encouraging, and it leaves the door open. If you've got a soft no in your family, there's no point closing the door now. They do not care about this as much as you. I promise you can come back to this over and over again. And even though that's not our main goal, getting the no's, it doesn't hurt, that's for sure. So that's our main thing at an individual level. And then, of course, the groups, the signs on your fence, wearing your T-shirt, all of that high visibility support is really important, because we need to create a social movement that is positive and that says we can do this. Don't worry about the the people on Facebook making up all sorts of crazy things. And, you know, we saw that work with COVID. We saw people just quietly and positively talk to their friends and family and get on with it. And we're going to see it again.
Emily, just staying with you for a moment, I wonder if you can elaborate. You've told us lots of things people can do, but some of the most useful actions people can take. And I know you've chatted about people needing to get comfortable with talking about the voice, and Dean talked about people feeling awkward about it and worried that they'll say the wrong thing. Can you share your thoughts on that, and maybe if there's any insights in the polling? But if you could just elaborate some more on the power of conversations and I guess help people in that area.
Oh, absolutely. So the power of conversations is fundamental to this campaign. We can, you know, run all the advertising we want, and we can try to get up as many news stories as we can, and that won't hurt. But the ability for our supporters, who are our main strength in this campaign, to talk to other people about what this really is and about the moral case for this is very persuasive. And it's persuasive not just on this issue, it's persuasive in all areas of politics and civics. The reason and the reason we're kind of so directly encouraging that is that what we're seeing on this campaign more than others is that our supporters are so committed that they're almost nervous to do it, because they don't want to stuff this up, and they know what's at stake, and I know what's at stake. But we can't let that be a barrier to us. Our solidarity will not be enough. It's a verb. We've got to do the solidarity. And that means starting. And if you have a conversation and you think, oh, I didn't know the answer to that question, that's okay. The support is there. There's so much information. Anyone who says they need detail, all they got to do is Google it and they'll drown in it. But if you want support with how to have an effective conversation, we've got a guide on our website. The Together Yes model is fantastic because you're a facilitator, so you're not just kind of one-on-one talking to people. Even for myself, you know, I've knocked on thousands of doors, and I know that's a high barrier for volunteers, but talking to strangers is not my favorite thing to do. You know, I'm 33, and if I could get my mum to call up and make a doctor's appointment, I would do it. So really just ripping that band-aid off, because we know so much about it. We know it's a contested space. We're worried that we're not going to have the answer, but the people that you will talk to will not be wanting that information from you. They will be coming from a base of 0, and you're at 80%. So, you know, turning to an Uber driver and ripping off that band-aid and saying, hey, have you heard about the referendum we're having at the end of the year? It is such a positive experience to go from that weirdness to, oh, I didn't know Aboriginals were the first Australians, which is what my most recent Uber driver said to me. And he said, Pakistani Australians really need to know about this. I'll tell my friends. Like, that is such an empowering experience, and all we have to do is cross that threshold. And then, having had that experience, when someone says, yeah, I don't really like this idea, you're like, okay, well, that's fine. Some people have to be that way. So I would just say, you know, remember that that this is a campaign like any other, and you have the power to change people's minds just by being passionate about it yourself.
Yes, indeed. Yes, you are the message. Yes. So Kath and Nicolette, and I'll start with Kath. The referendum is a little mini election campaign, and Emily talked about the field army, so which is going to be in every electorate. And we have all the usual campaigning tools with door knocking, events, markets, letterbox drops, street meet signs, bumper stickers, the T-shirts. I wonder if you could tell us what you've got planned in your electorates and the action that you're asking people to take. So, Kath, we start with you, looking good in your new T-shirt there.
Yeah, I've got my Wentworth for the Voice T-shirt on. I'll tell you.
Yes, it's fantastic. So tell us what's happening in Wentworth and Wentworth for the Voice.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Tina. I just want to acknowledge I'm coming to you from Gadigal land this morning, and hello to everybody. So we started thinking about this back in February and put together a voice project management team. So we spoke to some of our committed volunteers, and we've now got about 6 of them who've essentially signed up to see this campaign through right to the referendum. So we're supporting these volunteers through Allegra's office. And we've been working together for some months now to plan out the campaign and the activities that we want to do here in Wentworth. So this has included setting up a new community group, which is called Wentworth for the Voice, which is specifically intended to be a non-partisan community support group for all voters in Wentworth who would like to support the Yes campaign. So we've secured support from both Liberal and Labour councils in Wentworth, and we're working across party lines to include everyone who wants to get involved. So we're speaking with local businesses and lots of local community organisations as well, churches and synagogues and sports clubs who are keen to get behind this. So it's a really great opportunity to really reach into the community and make good connections there as well. So we've set up a new website to support this group, Wentworth for the Voice, which you can find very easily if you just do a Google search. We've designed new t-shirts, which I'm wearing today, I've just shown you. We've got phone stickers that we've given out to volunteers. I don't know if you can see on the back of my phone there, we've got a little sticker. So we're handing those out, and the idea of that is it's got a QR code on, which takes you straight to the website and can give you information about how to volunteer and get involved. So that's one of our bits of collateral that we've got. Allegra launched Wentworth for the Voice last month, and we've already recruited over 250 volunteers. So we're really thrilled with the level of interest that we've got locally. We've set up an onboarding team. We're allocating volunteers to 12 local neighbourhoods around the electorate. And this is a bit of a learning from the election campaign, just that when people are in very local groups, they really find it easier to connect with their neighbours and to do the more local activities. So doing that, they'll have neighbourhood leaders and they'll have kitchen table captains and door knocking teams eventually. And they can organise local activities like walking in t-shirts and coffee meetups and going to markets and that kind of thing. So that's how we're sort of organising the volunteers for this campaign. And importantly, we've been training our volunteers. So as they're onboarded, we want to ensure that they are really well informed about the voice. They've agreed to a behavioural code of practice and they feel confident in having conversations with the public. So as we've discussed a bit earlier, this is a bit of a challenge for some people, and it's there is an element of concern that people won't know how to answer questions or will get a tricky question and feel unable to answer it. So we've been doing role plays with our volunteers in our training sessions to get them used to talking about the voice, and also to understand that no one's expected to have all the answers. There's, you know, the really important thing is to engage in the conversation and find out what the concerns are that people have. So we're encouraging our local neighbourhood groups to organise kitchen table events, which I think Mary will be speaking a little bit more about, to organise walks in t-shirts, as I said, have conversations at local markets as well as with neighbours, and we'll also be organising more centralised key events. So we've just had the launch, so was it attended by, I think it was more than 300 people who came to that, which was really, really awesome. We've got a town hall and information evening happening on Thursday this week, which is about providing really factual and objective information to voters who have concerns perhaps about or questions around the voice and may not be entirely sure how to vote yet. So we've got an incredible panel of speakers on Thursday, including Professor Tom Karma and Dr. Shireen Morris and Ruby Langton-Batty. So we're really looking forward to that. If anyone is nearby and would like to register for that event, I'll put the link in the chat shortly. And actually today, one of the first major activities our volunteers are doing is they're already out today across Wentworth distributing 15,000 flyers to promote that event. So we're really looking forward to that. We're also aiming to hold a youth forum at the end of August to bring together the younger people around Wentworth who are keen to be involved. and to encourage all of the new voters who are becoming eligible to vote to make sure they're registered by the time of the referendum and that they're properly informed. So that's another piece, and we'll be speaking directly to the high schools about that as well. A key aspect of our campaign is going to involve door knocking the whole electorate. So to do this, we are again learning lessons from our experience during the federal election campaign and planning this out very carefully, including the recruitment of volunteers, training them, and how we manage data. So the focus here will be on having meaningful conversations with voters who are unsure how to vote. And if they're looking for information, we can point them to the resources available from the national campaigns, as well as we have a frequently asked questions section on our own Wentworth for the Voice website. And the key message that we're trying to get out is that if you don't know, then find out. There's ways that you can find out information and get yourself informed. We'll have more events as the referendum draws closer, but our immediate focus is on training and empowering volunteers to have all these important conversations. Yeah, so that's where we're up to, and we're all really enjoying the process so far and looking forward to it.
Oh, wow, Kath, thank you so much. Yes, we're well done. Look at the claps coming through there, and it was lovely to see you smiling throughout that, Emily, just going, yeah, this is so great. So Nicolette, so how is it different you don't have a supportive, tell us what you're doing in Bradfield to help the community support the voice.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that someone popped in the chat that Wentworth was gold standard. They really are, and we're doing what we can so far in Bradfield. We might be a few weeks behind, but that's really inspiring, Kath, just fantastic. Yeah, because we don't have an independent MP, we have here in Bradfield, the local member is also on the opposition's front bench. So I think you might have followed that there is a party solidarity that members of the front bench and the opposition are in the no camp. Now, I think the member himself personally, and that's up to, the politics out of the way from this point forward, might be a yes voter, but he hasn't said as much. So how we're dealing with that, Tina, is really just to put that to one side. And just like we did when we ran our own community independent campaign back in January through to May last year, was let's just go high. Let's turn up, let's organise, and let's, as I mentioned before, be inclusive. Let's be caring and listen to people. Let's collaborate with others where we can find common ground. And let's be courageous and have those conversations. So we're doing, I would like to say, before I go into some of the menu of things that we are both arranged and that we're considering doing, is to say that as a declared community independent candidate for the next general election in 2024 or 25, I'm very heightenedly aware that I come with some political baggage. And the last thing I want to do is to add that to what I want to be a non-political referendum. And so what happened when you were going to have a referendum is that I, as Nicolette in the campaign, was very committed to just being engaged in terms of improving civics, telling people there's a referendum, how to get involved and what it means and so forth. I was lobbied pretty hard by a core group of volunteers from the campaign who said, Nicolette, that's not enough. You need to run a hard yes campaign. And we danced around this for a while until early April, the Liberal National Party decided they were going to run no, which forced my hand. And now, given I was always going to vote yes, I'm now backing essentially our community group, Voices of Bradfield, to do our yes campaign. What we've done as well to try and depoliticise, so just to say that Voices of Bradfield surveyed the electorate after the last federal election, and the referendum, or a yes for the referendum, is one of the 5 top priority issues, along with climate change, refugees, and a few other priorities. So stepping in behind and supporting Voices of Bradfield is a really natural relationship, always has been, still is, thankfully. But there are a number of other groups already active in our community. There's the Northern Alliance for Uluru Statement of the Heart. We have the Uniting Church that's active. We've got sports groups. Even the local St Ives Shopping Centre, I noticed, has at least an Aboriginal flag. We haven't got the Torres Strait Islander one up yet, but this is new. So there are movements here. And if people aren't necessarily outwardly part of it, I can see, I can smell, I can taste that there is movement afoot here in what is traditionally a really caring electorate. Even though, you know, it's conservative politically, I really do believe that if we work really hard, we can turn this yes here. So what we're doing, as I mentioned, is we're backing in the voices of Bradfield. We too, oh, you can't see that, it's okay. But if you go to what we're doing is we're using the very lovely invitation of the Yes23 group. Thank you, Emily and team. And we are trying, as I said, trying to not be political in terms of being an independent candidate here, but we have, you can find us on Bradfield for Yes there. And from there, you can go into finding information about our campaign launch, which is coming up on toward the end of July, the 23rd. We've also invited independent members, Alice Degel, to take part in that. Why? Because she's a second-time parliamentarian, and I really want to hear from her what the experience would be like if there was a voice to Parliament in some of the decisions that she's made in terms of voting on legislation that's gone through the lower house. So, and we have Desmond Campbell from Welcome to Country, Adam Davids, a gentleman that I met through Responsible Investing in Finance, and Dr. Shireen Morris as well from Macquarie University and other places. Had a little bit of criticism already on Facebook and places, Where's Your No campaign. But like I said, I've worked in climate for 30 years. I completely welcome a caring and inclusive conversation, but this is about informing and engaging people on the invitation from our First Nations peoples to recognise them and in our constitution. That's our starting place. So we've started kitchen table conversations. There's a few Howards on this in participating in the convention today. He's taken himself south of the bridge, which is a big thing for the North Shore people here, and gone and got trained up with some of the Together Yes groups and other sort of capacity building, brought it back here. He's run a kitchen table conversation to help us see what we can do and how to do it better. We've and every week we're hosting kitchen table conversations as well. We're also taking out ads in our local newspaper and doing some columns in there as well to reach a sort of older demographic. It's a little more difficult where we have a local council who hasn't taken a position on The Voice or on any other particular social issues to engage. So we are finding ourselves having to have forums somewhat separately, unfortunately, but we'll continue to invite people from our local community to participate in those and to try and find space in their community as well. We can host these. On the nicoletteboele.com.au website, we have our own tab for The Voice as well, and Voices of Bradfield connecting in. So we are not having a Bradfield for Yes set of merch. We are encouraging, we're really thrifty with our finances, I suppose, but we are encouraging people obviously to get particularly the Yes23 materials. One thing we are doing is we're splashing out on a gazebo, and it'll be a Bradfield for The Voice gazebo with no branding on it particularly, maybe a few colours, but we're turning up and we're doing the Rotary Gordon markets, the St Ives village markets, and just going to where the people are rather than waiting for people to come to us. And in terms of social media, where we know we're going to meet the first and second time voters, we're looking at and thinking about how to basically not reinvent the wheel, but lean into the resources like groups like Yes23 have provided us through different tiles and what have you. And we're going to give it a crack to actually write to the schools and invite them to get engaged, particularly through the social justice and the leadership teams and the prefects. purely on the mechanics of a referendum and how to get engaged and informed so that they can, as I like to say, have clear minds and open hearts when they go to vote, probably in October.
Thanks, Nicolette. Yeah, fabulous things happening there in Bradfield. And we've been hearing a lot about the kitchen table conversations. So Mary, I wonder if I could bring you back into the conversation. And we know about the Victorian Trust's early model, but it's been refined to put into the service of the voice. I wonder if you could tell us about the essence of the model and how people can participate and get active.
Sure, Tina. And yes, can I acknowledge our First Nations people? I live and work on Wurundjeri land, and like Michelle, who's going to speak later, I actually grew up on Gunditjmara land in southwestern Victoria. And I think the best way we can pay our respects to elders past and present is to bring home the referendum. We developed our kitchen table conversation model some 20 years ago, and I guess I won't go into all of that except to say that it was the second iteration of our model when we applied it around the question of water and community involvement in water reform. That's when we tackled the question of how can you provide an educational dynamic in the kitchen table process so that it's not just about people sitting around having conversations per se, it's actually about people responding and connecting to material that you provide that enables them to recalibrate their thinking and possibly shift their thinking, in this case, towards a yes vote. So that was a long time ago, and we've applied it a lot since. And it was just spine tingling from our point of view that when Albanese announced last May that there would be a referendum on the voice in the first term, it was a no-brainer to us at the Women's Trust that we had to bring our model into the service of Indigenous-led campaigning, which is exactly what has happened. So our model, in essence, is people bring up to 10 people together, either in a home environment or a community space, a safe space, and they have a respectful dialogue around the voice referendum. We're calling them conversation hosts in this instance, but mind you, I think maybe that frightens people a bit, thinking they've got to sort of carry out a conversation for a couple of hours. But really, they're the manager of business, our conversation hosts. They manage the business, the agenda. They make sure that the group covers off on the activities that we've provided, and so on. We expect people in our Together Yes program to meet twice on 2 occasions, about 3 or 4 weeks apart. And so we've provided the first theme, for example, the first meeting is around recognition, and the second meeting will be around the voice and how it will make a material difference out on the ground. In between the sessions, we actually are providing about 10 varied resources that people can do as a little bit of homework to keep their brain ticking over before they come and reunite with their group. So we've tailored it specifically to bring home the referendum. I'm with Nicolette. We're not interested in running conversations in Together Yes, which help people assess the no vote as distinct from the yes vote. And I might come and be able to talk a little bit about the materials. But our position is where this is the kitchen table model in the service of the Indigenous-led campaign to bring the referendum home.
Thank you, Mary. And I wonder if you could expand on about those materials, what makes them unique, and also how people can access them. Sure.
Well, our website, togetheryes.com.au, is the main communication link with us. But look, I think it's really important, and Emily and I have had great conversations and laughter about this because, I try to outline the kind of underlying educational assumptions that we're making. And it's very important, I think, that we realise that the overwhelming majority of people who will go into the polling booth are not Indigenous folk. And the overwhelming majority of non-Indigenous voters will not at this point have a sufficient connection to the notion of a 60,000-year Aboriginal civilization in this country, and they will not have sufficiently unpacked their own settler narrative, prejudices, and the tropes that a lot of us have grown up with and we've had to unlearn as we've become more empathetic and more committed to Indigenous justice. So those assumptions are really critical to us. It's not about trying to provide a lot of people with technical detail about what a referendum is and what a double majority is. What we've done in the materials, and our first session materials were uploaded a week ago, and I'm happy to say that there are groups around the country who have already had their first meetings and using the materials. I'm now in the process of pulling together the second session materials by the 15th of June. I sort of feel as though I have a tsunami behind me and I'm dog paddling. But for example, we've produced a chronology using sort of decks of cards, if you like, in the first session, which we want the conversation hosts to put face down on the table, and then a process of slow reveal to have participants turn those cards up. And we've actually taken as inspiration the idea of this from Megan Davis and George Williams' profoundly great book, Everything You Need to Know About Uluru. But we've built the chronology out even more and in more detail, and nothing like that chronology actually exists in this country right now. And I would defy anybody who looks at that chronology of begging and pleading over 200 years for justice and recognition not to be moved by the relentless struggle, and that it's surely time to get this recognition business sorted. And there's another quick one-pager in our session materials, which I think effectively enables a whole lot of non-Indigenous people to finally, once and for all, feel a strong sense of connection to that past. So we've even tried a technique where we get people, and Aussie, all of you and everyone watching and everybody, Aussies are great travellers, they're great tourists. So they've probably been to the pyramids, they've been to Stonehenge, they know about the terracotta warriors. So we actually show in a deft move that kind of ancient history of civilization pales into chronological insignificance in comparison with Aboriginal civilization. And if you understand that past, and if you understand and can make that connection, the question of whether we honour that past and indeed celebrate it is just a no-brainer. So we've tried to produce materials that are unique. We're using videos. We've got a splendid 3-minute video of Jackie Huggins recollecting what it was like as an 11-year-old kid to watch her Indigenous mum campaign in the 67 referendum. So we're using video, we're using hard copy, and we're even getting in the first session people to sit and shut their eyes and listen to Megan Davis make the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Now, you'd be surprised at this point by how few people still, or how many people still have not actually heard or read the Uluru Statement. We can't take that for granted. So my point is, we're producing a pack of activities that we think enable people to feel more of a profound connection to the issues, and I think are more emboldened and encouraged then to start taking the conversation out to people in their families and their workplaces.
Oh, thank you, Mary. That is just extraordinary work. And I think if people are saying, oh, all my friends are already voting yes, what's the point of me holding a kitchen table conversation? Your quick thoughts on that. I mean, I think I want to hold them. The material sounds so fantastic. What do you say to people that say, look, all my friends already are?
Yeah, thanks, Tina. And interestingly, as we've developed up Together Yes and the session materials, that's been an early source of feedback. I don't need to join Together Yes or the campaign generally, because my friends are voting yes and so am I. And my message all around the country through April and May was, well, sunshine, that's not necessarily going to bring the referendum home. So I've been trying to convince people that if they really want to bring the referendum home, they can't assume that that majority in the 50s of hard yes, passionate people that Emily's talked about, it may not be, it probably won't be enough. And the sad fact is, if you recall, during the same-sex marriage propositions, that quite a bit of community support dropped off as the campaign became nasty and divisive. And we can't afford that to happen in this instance. So the Together Yes process, in my view, enables hard yes, committed yes voters to actually become more emboldened and self-assured to carry conversations through their families and workmates in the months to come. So I say it's not enough. And I would think, you know, back in 1967, when a resounding majority was achieved, that wasn't achieved because people said, but I'm already voting yes in the referendum. That was achieved because they got out and wore their shoe leather out and they joined forces, and the churches and the faith communities and civil society and organisations, they actually worked their butts off. And the case for doing that is even more profound now.
It is indeed. So by way of conclusion, I wonder if we could go around the group again, and if you could share with us any final comment that I'd like to make, but also if you were to recommend to people, like, what is the one thing you can do, the one big thing that could make a difference, and why? So Emily, maybe back to you. What's the one thing? Like, I'm struggling with what to do. Tell me what I should start first.
Okay, well, we've just spent a whole session hearing about all the things, and I'm not going to tell you which is the best tactic, but I am going to say the one thing that people can do right now, today, that will make the biggest difference is start. Pick a thing, do a thing, whatever it is. The biggest thing that you can do is start your solidarity in action today. That will help the most.
And the pledge, Emily, we've put the pledge. We put the pledge in the
I know.
chat.
Yes. Look, the biggest thing you can do is start, but also I would love it if you would sign the pledge to vote yes. We need to be able to contact as many people at a time as we can, and we're 4 or 5 months out. We need, the biggest email list that's ever been assembled in this country to get those materials to people, to get that encouragement to people. So I think it's in the chat now, and if it's not, I'll put it there shortly. And I think everyone in this room can start by signing our pledge to vote yes, because I'm sure you're all going to vote yes. And then you can pick another thing from this smorgasbord of options and start.
Fantastic. So Nicolette, maybe if you tell me your thoughts on the one, any other final comments, but the one thing.
Yeah, so Dean really invited us to keep it simple and really high level and talk to the heart. However, I imagine there's a lot of fastidious people also on the call who want to be informed. So don't reinvent the wheel. The resources with Together Yes and Yes23 and others are outstanding. If you haven't already, go to their websites and get their materials. They're very useful, particularly for kitchen table conversations. It's like getting it's a superpower booster. Structures there, and you'll get really confident then having conversations. So that's one. I'm going to sneak a second one in, Tina. It's very possible that your sports club or your synagogue or your temple or your church group or others have already done some kind of social media commitment to this. Share that, because when people feel, oh, my club, my tribe, they're supportive of this, it's just one less culture war piece, right? It's just one more safe place where I feel I belong, so I don't feel like it's outside to say yes. That's probably it. And thirdly, Tina, it would be remiss, just because, again, climate, I feel a little bit, sometimes I can be overwhelmed. There's a lot to go on here, so I'm going to pop in the chat. Keep mentally well, connect with people, be positive. This go high. If you do feel down and overwhelmed, there are places to go for help. Obviously start with talking to a friend first. If you can't, then seek professional help if you need to.
Yes, I think that's it, because there's 4 months ahead of us. And we do need to keep people's morale up, because it is going to be a long slog, even though 4 months isn't that long. I wonder, Kath, could you tell us any final comments and your one big thing?
Yeah, thank you. Well, certainly we are expecting to see a lot more engagement as we get closer to the referendum. So I would say that that's why it's so important to be working now to establish really good, strong environments and forums for disseminating factual and objective information, and making sure people are really comfortable talking about the voice. And this is important because we need to counter any disinformation or scare campaigns that are going to be thrown out there. You know, that are there designed to distract and confuse voters. So I think keeping the messages very simple and also coming back to the Uluru Statement from the heart, it is a really crucial thing to remember. That is essentially what we are doing here, is responding to that invitation. And I forgot to mention actually that we have also sent that a copy of the Uluru Statement from the heart. We put it in a hard copy newsletter, a special edition that we put that we sent out to the electorate, that was all about the voice and what Wentworth for the Voice is doing. So absolutely echo what was said about a lot of people haven't read it or don't know what's in it. So keep coming back to that. So just also that, you know, the community engagement part of this is so important. The grassroots local movement, I think, as the discussion moves away from politics and politicians in Canberra, it's going to be really important that the local communities are working together and coming together and talking and having these conversations. So yeah, I think the one thing I would suggest is get involved. So sign up for any local volunteers groups that are in your local electorates, or if there isn't one, then get started. We're very happy here in Wentworth to help out with that. We've got a lot of resources and are very willing to help any other groups that would like to get started. Sign the pledge, that's the other thing. And there was one more thing. Oh, have conversations, just start talking. Yeah.
Thanks, Kath. And Mary, your one big thing, obviously, to have a kitchen table conversation, but
yeah, obviously, you know, we want to keep building all through June and early July. This massive number of managers of business, our conversation hosts all around the country, because that's where the capacity to influence hundreds of thousands of voters is huge. And you know, and I might ask Emily to do a favour and pop that URL link, Emily, into today's proceedings for the Shabbat table talks. This is a brilliant example of people coming together in partnership, where Ilona Lee from Sydney, head of J61 media outfit, has copied the Together Yes website, made it appropriate for their Friday night Shabbat dinner table conversations. They have the capacity to hook up with thousands of Jewish people all around the country using our session materials and so on. So, you know, it's a great example of partnering up and being in solidarity, as Emily said. My only other comment would be, in terms of the conversations you have with your family members and shopkeepers and others, is, you know, to find a touchstone, to find a way in to somebody to start having a positive self-doubt, registering about their position they're holding or their prejudice. Marc Chagall, the artist, once said, and it stayed with me all my life, that if you cry softly, you touch me. And I think I was having a conversation during the week with a woman who was from Bosnia, and she said her family are really hard and hostile to the idea of Indigenous people having a voice, because their migrant experience, they've had to work hard, they've had to do this, they've had to do that. And I just talked to her about, well, find a way of turning it around gently with them, such as, yes, but you haven't had your children removed from your family. You've been able to get bank loans. You've actually been able to be paid wages. You haven't had members of your family incarcerated because of systemic racism through our justice system. I mean, I was gentler than that, but I think we have to find ways in which we try and touch people rather than trying to ram home referendum campaign materials to them. So that would be my parting advice, that you try and find a touchstone that is more likely to strike a chord with a person who's in the soft no or the hard no.
Thank you, Mary. That's really great advice.
Can I just quickly add something to that, Tina, very quickly? Just talking about having difficult conversations, and one of the things that Cathy McGowan has said, and we've been using this in our training, is people don't always remember what you have said. They remember how you make them feel. So I would completely endorse what Mary's just said, and just, you know, remember to have empathy and be listening to people as well.
Yes. Thank you so much. Well, we know a lot of people are worried about the thought of the yes vote getting up, but I think what's really come out of this discussion is that the antidote for that concern, which is very real, is action. And if I could just give a final plug to the Yes Pledge, if we can pop it up again in the chat. So if you haven't already, could you just do it now? It's really quick. Share it on your socials, and maybe in the chat, let us know that you've done it. And just to quote Dean in his latest newsletter about the pledge, is that every pledge is a promise to work together, walk together in this campaign, a history-making moment towards recognition, towards belonging, to a voice. And also to remind people that all the while that we are working to support the voice, we are community building, we are mobilising, we are activating. This is a mini election campaign, so we will be paying attention to what works and what doesn't, and learning from the process. Because the process of organising won't be over after the referendum, and all of us in the independent movement, we can bring the learnings from that to the next election. So if we want a healthy political ecosystem, we need diversity and respectful conversations, and building community is political action. And over the next few months, let's all of us put our political action to the service of the voice. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Michelle. She's going to sum up the call to action and her thoughts on the discussion, and her reflections to close the morning's panel about the voice. So I'll hand over to you, Michelle.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tina. And thank you, Emily, Mary, Nicolette and Kath. It's been great listening to your conversation on the back of Dean's conversation. I'm sure everybody's appreciated listening, hearing your words, what you're all doing in your different spheres of influence. And I think, as Dean mentioned in this morning's session, so far the narrative has been really dominated by the politicians. You know, it's time for actually the community voice to rise to the top. You know, we've heard about the power of conversation from Emily, Mary, Nicolette and Kath this morning. So thinking, what is it that we can all do? You know, get comfortable with having those, we're talking about the referendum, having important conversations with our friends, our family, our work colleagues, the Uber driver, whoever it might be. Put up a sign, throw a bumper sticker on your car, and encourage others to be part of the conversation. And, you know, as we've spoken about through this session, sign the pledge. You know, we hear a lot of white noise out there about, you know, it's clinging to the no vote and things like that. But through our little steps, we can all show our solidarity. You know, my kids look at me and go, Mum, why? Why does the whole country have to have this conversation about our community having a voice? So let's, you know, attend a voice event. You know, if you want to go further, volunteer for the Yes23 campaign. I'm sure Emily and the team there have got an open door. Like, let's actually support what's happening across the community. Hold it together, Yes Kitchen Table conversation that Mary's spoken about. But also volunteer for your local group. Ask your local MP, what are they doing? If you can't find a group, start a group. And I think it's really important that we also take time to listen to multiple perspectives. It's our job to encourage people to have the confidence to have a conversation, you know, and remembering that the Uluru Statement, as Dean said this morning, was designed in the spirit of faith, love and hope. And we need to take that forward in those respectful conversations that we have. You know, and I know that I'm putting my faith in the Australian people that collectively we're going to vote yes. You know, starting anywhere leads everywhere. So as Emily said, just start wherever it is, just start. And I'm going to channel a 1970s political campaign, which some of you will be very familiar with, but it's time. You know, it's time. How much longer do we have to wait? So that's my parting words. It's time. Just take that conversation further. And I'm now going to pass to Jill, who I think is going to give us the wrap, or Tina.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and to our wonderful panel, Nicolette and Emily, Mary and Kath. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the amazing work that you're doing. So back to you, Jill.
Oh, wow. What an amazing session that was. And I have to say that's the first session for the day that I've actually been able to absorb it all. And it was terrific. Thank you, Tina, for sharing that. And thanks to everyone. And thank you, Michelle, for summing that up at the end.